Hello. Everyone's filing in here. Welcome. This Monday afternoon. This is our 600th new social environment, which is wild. I am Carolyn, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the real pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Jay Elizondo, Lorenzo Triburgo, and Ksenia M. Soboleva. We're thrilled to welcome poet Mel Elberg here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We encourage you to check the chat for a living document of resources and actions. The Brooklyn Rail would like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support for our growing archive. You can view today's event and our full archive on the Rail's YouTube channel. We'll link to that. And now I'm really thrilled to introduce our guests and hosts. Artist Jay Elizondo's work seduces viewers into visceral confrontations with the queer body. Elizondo's work has been featured in exhibitions such as Smack Mellon, Pfizer Building, Amos Eno Gallery, and in Miami, including the 2018 and 2019 satellite arts fairs. Her curatorial projects include Unfixed at SoMad, which we're here today to talk about, and You Remember How Lonely at Please Don't Come to This Show. Her work's been published in the Brooklyn Rail, Daily Lazy, Sidewalkkilla, Front Runner Magazine, and SoMad. Through performance, photography, video, and audio, Lorenzo Triburgo, often with their partner and collaborator Sarah Van Dyke, elevates trans queer subjectivity and abolitionist politics. Lorenzo was awarded a 2019 workspace residency at Backer Street, an AIM fellowship at the Bronx Museum, and they are in the permanent collections of the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago and Portland Art Museum. They co-curated Criminalize This at Amos Eno and Unfixed at SoMad. And our host today, New York-based writer and art historian, Dr. Ksenia M. Soboleva, specializes in queer art and culture. She holds a PhD from the Institute of Fine Arts, NYU, with a dissertation entitled Fragments, Art, AIDS, and Lesbian Identity in the United States. Her writings have appeared in the Brooklyn Rail, Hyperlogic Art Agenda, and various exhibition catalogs. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Ksenia. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you to everyone at the Brooklyn Rail for making this possible, as always. And thank you to Lorenzo and Jay for joining me today. Lorenzo, you and I have known each other for a while, and we've had many informal conversations around queer identity. And Jay, I am so excited to have been introduced to your work through Lorenzo. And when I went to see the show at SoMad, I was just blown away because it holds so much, but at the same time is very open-ended. And you know, with exhibitions that center around queer identity and trans identity in particular, there is often a tendency to fixate on certain dichotomies, right? Before, after, masculine, feminine, happy, sad, testosterone, estrogen, right? And your exhibition actively works against that trope. So can you talk a little bit about how the exhibition came to be, how you guys met, how you started working together?
Yeah, well, first, we want to say thank you. This is really amazing and exciting, and we're both huge fans of you and the Brooklyn Rail, and this is really amazing and cool, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, well, first off, like, we have been kind of in each other's circles for like 2, 3, 4 years now.
4 years, yeah.
We've been like curated in shows together. I was in the Criminalize This show that Lorenzo curated. We did a studio visit once because I like wanted to take their class and I couldn't. So I was like, please, I want to meet you somehow. So there was like all these opportunities for us to kind of interact, but it was all very much in passing. So the last kind of thing that we saw each other at, which was at Baxter Street, we both had prints in there. We were like, we're gonna do something together. Like we need to make this work. And this was when we got together.
Yeah, so, and I always love when I meet someone and immediately we have like a million ideas together. So we were just talking at the benefit about how we wanted to put up a show, and we were like, let's find like a DIY space to like put up a show or something. And Jay was like immediately like, yes, I totally want to do that. I've been thinking about similar things. And then we started talking about like gender and but like transness more, like a trans queer lens. And so I just got, really excited about that. And even, when we did the studio bits, like our conversations always felt very like just a good flow and like on the same page. And so then when I saw the SoMad open call for curatorial proposals, I immediately like sent it to Jay and was like, oh my gosh, I think this is the thing. Like, should we try to do this? And so yes. And so then we just started to talk more about what that would look like and what we want to propose. And this is how we came up.
Unfixed is such a great title because it, the show addresses the fixation on fixedness in a way, right?
Yeah.
And how did you arrive at the title? And also, how did you decide to, I think that so often queer identity and trans identity are just lumped together, especially in the art world. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how trans identity moves away from queer identity, but also how they are connected and what made you decide to include artists in the show that don't necessarily identify as trans, but do identify as queer.
Yeah, so also I love these multi-part questions. So like, but I also will like go off in a tangent. So like title, I'm like, so I'm jotting things down, but and I also was like kind of excited to talk about the process. So coming up with the title is part of the process because I also really love collaboration, and I feel like it doesn't get appreciated as much as it could or should, or acknowledged as much as it could or should in the art world and everywhere else. But so for the title, like we were just on the phone a lot, and we would be like working on Google Doc drives, like living documents. And so, so we're just doing like brain dumps and just talking. And one of the things that we came up with in the curatorial proposal was the misconception of fixedness. And so then we kind of just like ran from there doing like, whatever, like just pulling from that and coming up with that.
Yeah, because like when we were writing the proposal, we were talking a little bit about what you were saying earlier. We wanted to do something revolving like trans queerness, but we didn't want it to be what we've seen in the past, what we've been a part of in the past. We wanted to kind of have a conversation that complicated things a little bit more, and have a conversation about what we're both experiencing in very different ways, which kind of lend itself to like Lorenzo stopping T, me starting E, and kind of like that kind of then catalyzing us to talk about the differences in passing and the like privileges and harms that come with that. And I'm like very green right now. So it was kind of me being like, yeah, this is happening to me, this is happening to me. And Lorenzo kind of entering a, like a sweet kind of, supportive, caring role. Cause it's the idea of like being unfixed was kind of the summary of that entire conversation. And it was also then when we like saw the artist and we realized, okay, everyone's kind of talking about this, so that's got to be the title, that's got to be the catalyst for the whole show.
And so going off of that, I stopped taking testosterone after 10 years of being on T, kind of at a moment. And I think I also want to kind of talk about like the political moment we're living in, and even, just, all the stuff that's happening, like Roe getting struck down or whatever recently, like everything that's happening right now, like that's been happening, since May when we started working on this to now. It's just been, so I think for me, it's always about reflecting on the political moment as well and seeing like, okay, what was happening during that time. And so for me in 2018, like the Trump administration had tried to remove the word trans from they did remove the word transgender from all federal websites and tried to define gender as something, federally defined as based on your genitals assigned at birth and unchangeable. So I always thought, okay, I want to be, so I've been thinking about the idea of gender abolition. How do I embody that? How do I make that as, a creative project, but also using my body and my presence in the world as part of that, as, embodying gender abolition. And I think that in terms of like queer and trans as like similar but different lenses, I think that what trans kind of adds to the story, to the concept, right, is this idea of embodiment and transformation and changing. And I think that, yes, queerness is something that is embodied and lives, but I think that what trans and trans studies, right, can kind of bring is the transformation itself as a way of being and a way of living that necessarily goes against the like capitalist patriarchal structures that we live in. Relational.
And actually, maybe Carolyn, maybe we can go to the shimmer photographs as we talk about this, because Lorenzo, you and I met through your shimmer project. I was very lucky to see that during the pandemic, and one of the many reasons that I was so excited by that work is because I think I've noticed that in recent years in queer scholarship, there has been a move away from the body. And thinking about the ways in which queer identity and gender moves beyond the body, which I think is absolutely a conversation that needs to be had. But I'm sort of waiting for the body to come back and to think about the ways in which the body and an expanded notion of what a queer body is, right? The ways in which it still functions as a meaningful index for queer experience, right? And your work and the Shimmer project in particular just fucks with gender in such an amazing way. So maybe you can talk about this series a little bit, and then I'd also love to talk about Jay's work more, and then move into perhaps discussing the other artists in the show.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for saying that it fucks with gender, because like that, like, yay, done, I'm done, like whatever, that's great. So I had gotten the residency with Baxter Street, and this was, so I got the residency, and my partner, Sarah, and I, who we often collaborate, we're talking about, passing all the time, but her as a queer femme person being perceived a certain way, when we're standing together. So we were always kind of in conversation, since I came out as trans, and about how we're read based on each other. So just in terms of like the collaboration, it really felt necessary to do Shimmer as a collaboration, because how I'm read and perceived is very much in relation to how my partner is. And the same goes for Sarah. And so we worked for like a year doing all kinds of different pictures to think about how do we picture that? Like, how do we image that? And also image the process of coming off tea, but without it being like a before and after, or like super diaristic or something like that, right? To kind of have it connect to a broader idea of gender abolition. And gender abolition is really about removing the entire structure that gender lies on, right? So we were doing test shots, and we went to Reese Beach, which we can absolutely talk about more, but a very, we think of it as like a queer sanctuary for ourselves. So it's literally the place on earth where we both feel the most comfortable in our bodies. And we were just there yesterday, and like,
I was there yesterday.
You were? How did I not see you? Oh my God. Well, how did we not?
No, actually, I will tell you. I will tell you. It was kind of, it it was almost an argument about this because I was with, well, that doesn't matter. But basically we were gonna meet other friends, and I thought that we were all meeting. For me, the Reese Beach is the queer part, the little part where you and I always see each other, right? That's the only place at Reese that I ever go.
Yeah.
And the people I was with were thinking it was like a 20 minute further walk, and I'm like, that's not the queer part of Reese. That's and then I felt like a know-it-all, like that's not the queer part. But that's I actually didn't go.
Okay.
I kind of bypassed it. I was like, bye, friends.
It's okay. Sometimes it's like, it's good to show like, just compromise and like go with the flow,
But yes, can you talk about Reese and why that part is the queer part?
Yeah, so yes, and so this picture in particular is a great place to start. So Mars, this is behind Mars here, the building that's the background is the Neponset Beach Hospital, which from the turn of the 20th century was a, oh my goodness, like a home, like a hospital, a sanatorium, basically a place for people who are mentally ill, basically, being kept there. And then in 1992, I believe it was, officially condemned, so no longer in use. But at the same time, since the 1940s, this sort of half mile, maybe quarter mile section of that beach has been queer. So since at least the 1940s, queer people knew to meet up at this place. And so if you're looking at this image to the right, there's sort of a bank or dune, let's say a man-made dune. And then the other side of that is residential area where conservative straight people live and have been for decades trying to get the queer people to leave to get, because we're like a blight on their horizon, basically. But they're not the important part. The important part is that we show up there every weekend or every day, en masse, and there's like a strength in numbers. There's a real community feeling. Reese is accessible by public transportation, which is another really important part of having access to the ocean, and an important part of it, that it's, it's a public park, in the very real, like how that's meant to be. And so this picture, Mars, is for anyone who's ever been there knows, like, okay, this is Reese, this is like our safe spot. And I also really love it because it's anti-assimilationist, right? So we're choosing this space that has barbed wire and broken glass and debris that no one else cleans up, and instead of thinking like, oh yeah, the queers, poor, oh my God, you guys, I feel so bad for you, you're just getting like the scraps. It's like, no, actually we're putting ourselves here because like the, cis het norm people don't want to be there. So that's, we claim it.
Yes, exactly. I know. Yeah. I mean, I love it. It's just great to be surrounded by, I've written about queer artists' use of trash, and as meaningful material, right? So what made you decide to not include this work, but include your gum shots in the SoMad exhibition? And maybe we can pull up an image of that, Carolyn. And that was my first time seeing that work. I had no idea. I was cool. Hello, Hannah Wilkie.
Yeah, so with gum shots, honestly, I shot that quite a while ago. The photo, but I felt like there was never, or I hadn't yet come upon the appropriate conversation around it. And I felt that if we're going to be talking about the body and embodiment and like a trans queer lens, so instead of, kind of doing something that was representational and including my body or a body, that using this, the bubble gum, that these images are kind of bodily, right? They're almost like flesh-like, almost anatomical, but they're also kind of ambiguous. And that's, I think, so that to me felt like, I think either work would have fit well, like in terms of the theme, but I really like the idea of like the ambiguous aspect of the gum shots as part for this particular show.
Yeah, absolutely. I sent some images to a friend and I was like, this is gum. And she thought I had made a typo. And she was like, is it cum? And I was like, no, this is gum. photos of gum. So just to clarify, this is gum.
Yeah. And there's a little, yeah, it is gum. It's definitely gum. It's like the title of the series, Gum Shots, is a play on words. And yeah, it's gum.
And Jay, what informed your choice of which work to include in the show? And let's go to an image of Jay's work now.
Well, I think it's very interesting, your comment earlier about the body kind of being re-entered. And a big way that I differentiated my queer identity with my trans identity was when I was just identifying as queer, I didn't think about my body the way I think about it now. I didn't really have to. The way that I have to think about my body now in every way fathomable, from hair to safety to how I clothe it to how I perform using it to navigate the world. I never really thought about these things to the caliber that I do now. And I do find it funny that we both put work in here that doesn't have the body in it. Yeah, so this is a piece called His Secret Was Killing His Shine. And this was the last body of work that I made before like socially transitioning. So I thought it was fitting to give it its moment in this space because it's kind of a send off to my identity before I was like out as trans. And it also has to do with my mother. And so a lot of the conversation that I'm having with my mother in this work, I'm being gendered incorrectly because it's talking about like a past version of me, and it's coming to terms with that kind of just her experiences with it and mine, and kind of both of our stories. And I didn't think about that when I was making this work, that it was kind of a send off or a kind of closing that chapter so that I could. But I also don't see it as like a before and after, because this specific piece, the vanity, is also seen with a video. And the video is much more performative, and I'm performing as my mom and dressed as her. And this is me like queering her objects. And when I was making this particular piece, I was thinking a lot about like the present, as the video felt very much like it was a past. And then when they were put together, they were like collapsing on each other and having a conversation because these objects are also in the video. So the way I was thinking about this at the time was about like an encroaching queerness that was kind of taking over her and taking over her objects, that she might not have asked for, but having a queer kid, she's kind of like signed up for it anyway. Now I interpret it differently than I guess I did when I was making it. I see it much more now as me kind of just obsessed with like and hyper fixated on femininity and hyperfemininity to almost an absurdity. And yeah, so it's very playful, like Gum Shots is, because it had to be, you know, I'm talking about like really traumatic, horrible, awful, painful things. So, you know, Swarovski crystallizing a lemon pledge can was kind of my way of healing through glitter, which is funny because Shimmer Shimmer is also.
Yeah, glitter is where your work comes together in a way.
Yes, which we are, that's been noted.
So we were gonna do a glitter dinner.
I know.
It never happened.
Well, it's going to, because, you know, actualizing is my favorite thing in the world. So if we've spoken about it, it will happen.
No, I'm going to be there.
Yes. We didn't say that when that was proposed. That was last year. So now it was like we were waiting for the last piece, the puzzle piece. So now it can happen.
And there is more glitter in the show.
Yeah. Yeah, we could segue in like Darian. I know Darian.
Yes. So let's talk about the process of selecting artists, and you know, did you have an idea with every artist of a particular work that you wanted to show, or was it very much a conversation? And I would love to draw out some of the themes throughout the show, like queer hair, glitter, cyborgism.
What was the first thing you said? Queer what?
Care.
Oh,
Care.
care. Thanks.
Yeah, well, there was almost 500 applicants, which was very overwhelming for me because I had never curated on that scale before. So I was, many calls to Lorenzo, like, how far have you gotten? But I think we both took an approach of like, we didn't really want to read bios or like know who was, we tried to make it as anonymous as possible, even though it's obviously like we had names and bios, but we were much more interested in kind of like the artist statement and the work and like what the work was saying and what the conversation was about. And of course, like natural pairings and the kind of composition and the aesthetics of the works like came later. But I think it was much more about how it was gonna kind of tie into this conversation, knowing that like fixedness, unfixedness was something that we were really drawn to.
Yeah.
Let's go through the slides actually a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, basically, yeah, what Jay said, that pretty much sums up the process in terms of the selection. It was just, just a lot to go through. And what that actually to me speaks to, so the way that they did it, SoMad Gallery did their open call for artists at the same time as curatorial proposals. So the artists didn't know what they were or who they were really applying to besides SoMad, and we didn't know who we were going to have to work with. So we, our proposal was about, the misconception of fixedness. And so that was kind of left us open enough to be able to pull together works. So that said, we didn't know, but the number of applicants to me also speaks to the fact that SoMad did a good job in terms of recruiting or getting the word out. And because I think one of the things that I'm sensitive to, and I think we are sensitive to, and SoMad is too, is, not being like insular and trying to be aware of bias and implicit bias. And I think that's really important when you're putting a show together, when you're doing anything, but if you're, putting a collection of people together and you're working and you have resources to like be aware of implicit bias is important. So we try to be aware of that. And like Jay said, get rid of bios and look at the work, mostly images, and statements were important. But to me, the fact that we had so many applicants was a good sign that SoMad wasn't just like, being just in their insular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very excited because I was familiar with probably half the artists in the show, and then the other half I hadn't encountered their work before. Maybe we can just take a few minutes to pause at every artist's work, and you can say just a few words about it. Starting. Actually, can we pull up an install shot again? It's such an incredible space, SoMad. I had never been before. And I think it's about to be renovated, but it has like this, how would you even call it? The part where Peter's work is? Like
well, it's where the plumbing,
plumbing.
Exposed plumbing. So basically that's it. All the pipes and everything. That's where all the plumbing is.
So maybe let's see. Can we get a shot of Peter's work since we're just talking about that? I was very excited to see Peter's work installed in this show. Peter had an exhibition a few months ago with Hall Gallery that got shut down because of a homophobic landlord. So it's wonderful that he was able to exhibit his work here.
Yeah, I actually got to see that at the opening, and then Peter and I like ate pizza and talked about the show. And I told Peter then, like, it's one of my favorite bodies of work I've ever seen Peter do. I felt so drawn to it, and there was things that were being addressed that I had been thinking about and we never spoke about to each other. So I was like, I just felt seen and heard, and it was so beautiful. And So when, so Peter actually curated a show that we were in together in 2018 called The Unspeakable, a dark show. And so that was like the first time we ever interacted with each other. So it kind of felt very full circle to include Peter's work in this show. And when we told Peter that there was like a former bathroom kind of dilapidated exposed space with a literal drain in it, Peter was like, oh my God, yes. So it was perfect. And yeah, like this work is it's called Drain, and it's meant to be seen on the ground. In Peter's exhibition, it was projected, but here we put it on a monitor. And yeah, the thing I love about Peter's work is how tender it is. Like, yes, Peter's using like BDSM and talking about kind of bodily pleasure, but it's all coming back to this idea of like comfort. And I love that taking BDSM and desire and talking about it in a tenderness and a comfort, and kind of the body's really complicated and clunky, and having a body is really hard and confusing. And so for Peter to put like their body in, and for example, like this is like I don't even know what you would call it. It's like it straps around the back of the head and it like opens up your mouth and like forces your mouth open. And I know that for this particular like series of work, like Peter was thinking a lot about like the body's full of like holes and gapes. And so it just made sense to include this in this show, particularly dealing with kind of bodies being hard and weird and confusing. And yeah.
That's how I think about the work as well. It really explores the body as porous in a way that somebody like Bob Gober, you know, that's actually an interesting dialogue, or Ron Athey. I saw the show, I think I was the last person to see it, and I just sat there and I had the space to myself, and it was so moving. I just sat there and I cried.
Yeah, something that the slowness of the video. So like in this, you know, in Drain, where like Peter's tongue kind of comes up and like, you know, squeezes the uvula. It's the slowness of it, I think, is what is so like captivating and reflects the vulnerability that is needed to make this work. Mm-hmm. And I think we can see that. And like, I think that's another thing that we saw, another aspect of a number of the artists' work is this like idea of vulnerability, and it relates to queer care, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, the slowness and the pacing, and it's a loop, but you cannot tell that it's a loop like at all. It's very smooth and very like meditative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Should we go to another artist who approaches the theme of queer care?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we could go to Vincent maybe, or
Vincent, Kate.
Yeah, Kate. Let's go to Kate.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists here.
I also want to talk about Rachel's work.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
All right, someone, I don't know. I can't
talk about Ariel. I want to talk about Ariel.
Number 13.
And it's also, there's such a great, you know, you've included so many different media, and they're all in conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, so thinking about, so this is Kate Phelan and Cataldo, M at Rest 1 and M at Rest 2. And so, and also of note, they're like 12 by 12, right? So also scale, like they're so intimate. And yeah, so Kate is painting, and in general interested in like queer bodies in spaces of safety and at rest, and like thinking about how we hold our bodies in different ways in the world, and like the importance of allowing our bodies to rest in a way, and like giving ourselves that. And like a queer body at rest is in contradiction of how queer bodies move through the rest of the world, right? And most of the time. And so, yeah, so that's that. And then, yeah, there's a vulnerability in the figure, right? Sleeping, and like, that's a very vulnerable position, right? Like, you know, yeah, just so I think that they're like creating that space not only of safety, but of the figure being so vulnerable. And then it's also intimate too. And it like points to a level of intimacy that I think that Peter's work also does.
And access. I mean, you can't talk about, we're talking about the body so much, and you cannot talk about the body without talking about who has access to the body. And when you're queer, it seems as if your body is just this accessible thing for everyone. And so I love that both the figure has their back to you and is being like covered. And Kate's really interested too in what's lying around the house as kind of to talk about the symbol of care and like language around care. Socks and underwear and blankets, which does segue really nicely into Rachel's, who also is talking about like symbology and coding and language.
Rachel, 18, yes, Rachel Stern.
Yes, love. Oh my gosh.
Rachel.
Yeah, I know.
Is she here?
Rachel Stern in the house. All right, so for like I was thinking, so Rachel in this newer body of work that she's like, current project that she's doing, it's a little bit hard. You could see it in the main like wallpaper piece, but working with text, and Rachel is asking the question about if you photograph text and you render it into an image, can you change its meaning? And in a world where language and communication is so broken down, can we change the kind of the signification process? And to me, that makes me just think about the whole process of meaning making altogether, right? So in Shimmer Shimmer, I'm also thinking about with like astrology and like queer relations to the world and the universe, right? And so with like, photographing and imaging text in these very like dense, like visually dense images, and like obscuring the text, I think like Rachel's like pushing us to think about how do we make meaning out of things? What, I'm looking at the work because it's, I'm looking at it right here to my right, but I'm like, it's on screen. I'm like, so like, the eggs, right? So like, how do the eggs work on Ksenia, your brain? How do they work on my brain? How do they work for an art historian? How do they work for, transness, right? So I think Rachel in a way is like a really great entry point into this thinking about breaking apart structures, right? And that's so much what we're trying to do, is like thinking about how do we break down structures that are oppressing us.
And within those structures, like finding your people, finding your community, so much about being in community is being able to identify each other and talking through symbols and through coding. And that's something that you're doing in your work. That's something I'm doing in mine with the queered objects. So anytime an artist is working with kind of language and iconography and symbol as a form of communicating with one another, that's like near and dear.
Yes, and the eggs are also there's a really fascinating dialogue between the eggs and on the other side where you have Gabrielle's sculptures and also Theo's work. Can we pull up images of that? I think Theo is 19 and Gabrielle is 10. I don't know which one we should start with.
Either way.
Theo was one of the artists that I was not familiar with, and they really look like scabs from a wound, and they look really fragile. But then you mentioned to me that actually it's very sturdy.
Yeah, there's one like, okay, so the parts that are not in the core are a little bit fragile, but for the most part, they are actually fairly sturdy, especially the bottom right piece that is the latex. And that's the part that it looks like scab or skin, like, so thinking about like taking off your skin, right? And like, to me, I think about like this also in relation to the materiality of like gunshots and like how do you represent transness and the embodiment of transness. without picturing it. I don't know, further like the experience, because showing the trans body is not going to do that, but showing the idea of like layers being removed, right, and then cast away, to me is really interesting and kind of exciting about Theo's work.
And something that you explained when you were talking to me about like your ideas behind gunshots is something that Theo's also thinking about, which is like when language fails you, when you're trying to talk about the kind of like trauma and violence of like a trans body and all the changes you're going through and like scar tissue and bleeding and all of these things. And it's like so much more than all of those words even represent, or like how they make you feel when they sit in the mouth. So like to use the materiality that Theo's using in a way to have that conversation where like language doesn't work here, is really interesting, especially thinking about we're just talking about Rachel and how like language is kind of at the forefront. This is absolving itself of that and using it as kind of a way to complicate things.
Yeah, and then relates back to care as well, like packaging a wound or
absolutely.
And then Gabrielle's work sort of takes us into a different direction, where it's very, I of course in the little sculptures I see vaginas. This is a common Ksenia thing.
Okay.
Can you talk about the work a little bit?
Yeah, so the sculptures are unfired clay with the artist's hair in them. I don't think it's an accident that you see vaginas. I think that's okay. And then
We're in Oppenheim, like the fur cup.
Oh my God.
Like the idea of the fetish object.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, also thinking about fetish and fetishizing Black bodies, right? And especially hair. I think that's also like an important thing to point out.
People always want to touch.
But Gabrielle is really thinking about multiplicity, right? So when they're talking about their own work, they bring in like, being Black, queer, and femme, and how to bring that into a picture. That's kind of like where they're coming from. And I don't know, we were talking about one of the things that drew us to not only the sculpture, but the diptych is the play with masculine and feminine within it is so, in one way, it's kind of really overt, right? Like there's like a sexiness, right? So thinking about sexuality as bringing us into a gendered space, for better or worse, or sometimes bringing us into a gendered space. I think like the shininess, like the light that is used is very like sensual and like luscious, right? And then, but we almost like, I don't know, we were kind of talking about like, and I see it as like this sort of like masculine presentation, right? Where like, giving them a flower or like this like gaze. And then Jay was like, and I also seeing like the feminine aspect of it. So it just.
Yeah, and like the trope of like the rose, like, and what I like about Gabrielle's work specifically too is, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, and kind of how like Lorenzo and I came to the theme of the show, and a lot of what we were talking about while we were installing and the conversations we're still having, which is just that a lot of the times when talking about queerness and transness, there is a lot of like contradictions or dichotomies, binaries within, even though we're trying to dismantle the binaries. And I love how Gabrielle does that, because like they're talking about a bunch of different things and not really saying that they're like this or this. It's always like an and it rolls. And kind of the whole idea is to be intersectional, and the idea of like an intersected identity. And so that's something that I think almost all of the work is doing, is talking about like, it's pleasure and it's desire, and it's the need to be like loved and touched and cared for. But that is also because the same body that needs those things is also a body that's been traumatized and abused and harmed. And that is something that I don't think are opposites of one another. They're constantly informing each other, and to be one body that kind of holds all of those multiplicities and all those complications is something that makes it so strong. And that's why I like the kind of trope of like the flower or the cross or the like, you know, the kind of high-waisted trouser, almost like militaristic pose of the like diptych.
Yeah.
And it's also called Maybe I'm Just Like My Father. And Gabrielle's constantly using these ideas of like pop culture from like Black American entertainment. And so like that's impossible to ignore. And their video work as well. There's a lot of that happening as well.
Yeah, they have a great video in the
God, I love that video
as well.
So yeah, jumping off of that too, like, so two things, just like thinking about in the diptych, right? So, and thinking about vulnerability, like, so the one image, in the one image, the figure, the artist has a serious look, is gazing out at us, right? Is like presenting a toughness, I would say. And then the other one, we just see the neck, right? And so thinking about vulnerability, like exposing your neck, kind of like sleeping is a very like, that's a vulnerable gesture. So like to offer that up is like, I think like very vulnerable. And then I think also thinking about like the references to pop culture, another idea that we were thinking about when we were choosing the artists and putting together the show and the ideas is thinking about like queering time and like past, present, and future. And I think that that Gabrielle's pop culture references also do that, where it kind of like, you know, maybe I'm just like my father, like, you know, is it Prince? Is it like or is it like the artist in their very contemporary moment? You know, what does it mean for the future? But kind of the collapse of those things, I think, is also really interesting. But I think the pop culture references do that as well.
Yeah, and in queering time, there's artists that are also like queering the idea of space and the kind of access, privilege, and of the spaces that we are familiar with and like the spaces that we have access to. And so like Darian and Lee are two examples I'm thinking of that both deal with kind of the idea of like an impossible space or like world building as a way to kind of set the figures within it free and kind of create a safety. So when thinking about care and safety and like say like Kate's work, where it's within the kind of confines of like the apartment space, a space that like you feel safe, you close your door, you're in your home. You have Darian who's creating these kind of spaces that aren't spaces, but they have these moments of familiarity to like nightclubs or like underground scenes that you recognize, like the spiral staircase and the kind of mirrors, but they defy what we know for spaces to be able to function as like perspective and gravity. And Lee's work is doing very similar things as well when it comes to impossible spaces.
I love this one on the left, like, so everyone should come and see the show so that you can look at these images close up and see the like amazing little mountain scene that is in the, you know, in the doorway on one of the stairwells, and like and the like sort of fantastical aspects of these works, I think is, and then there's also glitter and like bringing the glitter and shimmer, I guess, like rhinestones are part of this, you know, and so bringing that not only as a cue, right, like as like a signifier or whatever, but also bringing that aspect of joy, right? I think, you know, we talk about queer nightlife as being really important. It's not just about like, you know, whatever, going out and getting messed up, right? It's about actually you know, having space where we come together, and there is that is important. I think it is very important.
And like we talked about, like Reese Beach being a place of safety, like nightclubs and queer spaces are also safe places, and kind of creating a spectacle of that is really beautiful. And, you know, of course, also talking about multiplicity, and you have like scenes within scenes within scenes in these paintings. So there's identity is being kind of transcribed in the ways in which we were really interested in in the show itself was to kind of talk about, like I keep repeating, like things are complicated, having a body is hard. So like here's kind of how to navigate that in this multiple way. And I feel like Darian's is very, very playful. And Lee's is very playful too, but I feel like Lee's also has like a really emotional, like Afternoon with Alex specifically. It feels like a interior space that you like know, like an apartment space almost, but it's also kind of confusing, and the figure is like almost ghost-like. It's kind of like a nude like posing session. Like there's so many things that stood out to me when looking at like Lee's work, especially this work, and this one is like less absurd, I think, than the other paintings that Lee has, but the idea of absurdity also plays a role in a lot of these works. And
I was going to say also like that it's this simultaneity of the body being a place of trauma, but also of fun, right? And so like also when I'm thinking about gender abolition, I'm like, I want to keep all the fun stuff. Like, let me just be clear that like all the fun stuff gets to stay, but all the like, hierarchical, oppression gets to go. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, let's get rid of that, but like we can still be like feminine and masculine, just won't be using those words probably. And we can still be, let's say, like, what could we say instead? We could still be like shiny and shimmery, and also like whatever, having a strong stance or whatever. Like we just need to change the words. But I think that's also what we're seeing in like Darian's work, for example. Like we get to keep the fun stuff and get rid of the rest.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day. It was something like, whoever taught straight women the word femme, may your days in hell be hot.
Thank you. Oh my God.
I want to keep this femme, and like, but which femme isn't about a heteronormative, division of, and
right.
But when you were talking about safe space, I couldn't help to think that this dichotomy extends to safe space as well. Safe versus unsafe, because yes, queer bars and clubs, they're meant to be safe spaces, but at the same time, that's never a given, right? And at the same time, there is always that sort of looming, pulse. And there is one work in the show that very much reads as an altar, or memorial.
It's like a sigil. Gino Romero's work. I don't know what slide number it is off the top of my head, but
I think it's
glitter on the ground.
It's maybe 9. Yes, 11. Yeah.
And it's bringing this work up and talking about safety not being promised in queer spaces, but safety also not being promised in queer and trans bodies. Just the body itself as a space that seems safe but is not inherently safe. And the images of the figures in this altar, some of which have been targeted. There's trans bodies there that have been harmed, put through painful experiences, have been unsafe, but also have been a safe space in their legacy and in the kind of queer historical landscape in which they have operated in. And I think Gino's thinking a lot about that kind of safety in the history and in the archive, knowing what has come before and what has paved the way. And I think the history can be really empowering, and kind of in its devastation, obviously, but empowering to say that like these figures stood in a space that we want to be standing in and have fought in a space that maybe we don't necessarily have to fight for. Or the fight has maybe shifted slightly, but is still coming from the same themes and ideas. And to kind of position that in this like ritual and this
sigil altar.
Yes, thank you. Is really, really the second we saw it, like Lorenzo and I were like, yeah. And that the body, a figure of glitter towards the back was like what drew us immediately. It's just like that glitter figure on the ground, kind of in these sigils was just, and you know, going back to glitter, always glitter.
We should also point out that the body in the background is almost, what is it, like 6 feet across. So it's just for scale. It's kind of a large layout. But so I'm thinking, and so
6'2", says Gina.
What did you say?
6'2".
6'2", yeah, because it's Gino's body. Because it's Gino's body.
It's with it. Yes.
Thank you, Gino.
Hi, Gino.
So and I don't want to repeat what Jay said. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And there's another work that's also directly on the floor that we haven't touched upon yet. That's right when you walk in on the left. So yeah, it's 7.
Yes.
Yeah, Aisha.
Yes. This was one of the works too that because one of the concepts that we haven't really talked a whole lot about, we spoke a little bit about absurdity, but also about like humor. And this work deals with humor while talking about something that's really not funny at all. And Aisha's talking a lot about negotiating hostile space and code switching. And one of the words that Lorenzo was using when we first started talking about this show, before we even saw this work, was identity trap. And so when we saw this, we both just kind of like the light bulb went off. And we were like, oh my gosh, yes. The idea of being fixed is a trap within itself, and having a body is a trap within itself, and femme and masc and hormones or not, all of these things that we are trying to complicate, you just run into more complications. Each door you open, more closing around you. And I think part of it is just embracing that it's hard and complicated, and there's not really a clean way to like tie it all together. And I feel like this work is doing that and Aisha actually like performs in this, and there's a song to it, and it's actually like her performing the song, and it's called Tricked Out Trap. And I haven't actually gotten to see her perform it in person, but like in the videos, it's amazing. And she actually like crawls into the trap and
she like
activates it. Yeah, she literally trips the trap.
Are you gonna do a performance?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is like a great segue, because Gino and Aisha are 2 of the 4 artists who will be performing at. We're gonna do an evening of like 4 short performances and 4 short videos, and so that'll be July 27th. And so Aisha will be here for that. And also I think what I think was interesting about the trap is also the way that we trap ourselves. And Aisha kind of talks about that when she was talking about the work, but that, we're also like implicated in the ways in our own trapping. Like we engage with capitalism, and so I think that was also kind of interesting to me.
I mean, Edward Said wrote identity is a trap, not in the context of queerness, but just colonialism.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a nice connection.
It's a great metaphor. I want to make sure we talk about all the artists. I think we haven't discussed Ash's work yet.
Yeah,
that's sort of where we also move into, I guess, queer futurity in a way, like
Yeah. So speaking about like comedy too, like I love Ash's work because it makes me laugh, and like Ash is actually just like a really funny human being. And the thing about Ash's work for Lorenzo and I, when we were experiencing it kind of for the first time, was we were talking about this idea of how do we kind of transcend feeling fixed and passing and all of these things. And then Ash like completely complicated that conversation that we were already having when introducing the idea of like ability and accessibility. So like in the video on the floor it's called Horse Girl, and it's like Ash kind of like performing, like jumping over hurdles as like a horse would in a horse show, which is just hilarious and ridiculous. And it's all within this kind of like 90s like internet culture like aesthetic, and the kind of virtual world, talking about world building and impossible spaces. And these are like 3D scans of Ash's body, which like they were explaining to us how they do it, and me and Lorenzo were like, yeah, great, amazing, because like never done that before. And so the like landscape prints on the left and right of the monitor piece is also like 3D scanned and kind of zooming in and abstracting this kind of avatar that Ash creates of themselves, and makes it look like body parts and fleshy, and obsessed.
There's also a humor to it, right? And a levity that I think is, I don't know, it feels important. It kind of goes back to the idea of like, I feel like the phrase queer joy gets thrown around a lot now, but it's not exactly that, but it is that there is, I think, important, like a playfulness, and that playing is like part of existing, you know, like, or forging in existence, I should say.
Yeah.
And making fun of the struggle, essentially, is like poking fun at the struggle while trying to also bring attention to it and talk about it.
Yeah, I think humor as a political tool was basically invented by queers. Then again, I think that many great things were invented by queer people.
I think most great things.
I think that all great things.
All great.
I think we can all agree.
We can all agree.
Wait, Ash, if you're in here, I'm sorry, I don't see you. I saw you before, but I'm not sure if you are. You could also throw in the link to the website that you curate. I don't want to say the wrong name at the moment, but Ash also curates an online space. So maybe you can throw that in there for us.
Yes, and any of the artists that are attending, please throw all your links into
link us up.
There is one that in the back room basically is, I don't think we have an install shot of it, but it's videos on
video, but
videos.
I want to talk about Lissay's work, which is,
I was gonna say, because that's
Vincent's work is also right there. We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, here's Lissay. So good. So yeah, Lissay has it's just under 20 minutes video piece that is kind of merging narrative. They're a musician and an actor, but yeah, they're merging like narrative with, how do I say, like personal video. Like basically there's like a lot of different genre playing that goes on in the video. So it's like live performance mixed with these like highly stylized sets, some of which are like, you know, actual sets, some of which are like not genetically modified. Oh my God, like digitally enhanced, whatever. Oh my God.
Yes, and the thing about this work is it's as it's playing while we're installing and like having conversations in this space, like it's a visual album and a short film. So like there's music, Lissay's music, and Lissay's singing, and we're all like learning the words and getting the words stuck in our heads, and like so it feels I feel close to the content because I'm like every day interacting with it in a way and like catching things I didn't catch before. And the idea of like this short film's called Immortal, and there's a lot of imagery that Lissay is using as kind of a metaphor. There's like a whole demon character, and quite literally talking about like demonization and like how to use that and like reverse it and to liberate, and the idea of darkness being a place of like being cast into or forced into, and then like using that space as actually a space of healing and intellectualizing, and then like becoming, and then going back out and being like, no, I'm this. And the kind of power that is set when you're cast away and have like only yourself to build and heal you, and then also your community. It's Lissé worked with a lot of amazing artists and creative people to make this short film, and they graciously like contribute and showcase everybody too. And all of these artists, by the way, like have, well, not all of them, but a lot of them have like zines and other small purchasables at SoMad, which you can buy online at the SoMad website. Little plug there, ding.
I keep forgetting that you guys are in the space.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we're pointing around like
yeah, it doesn't, it's somehow, it's like you're in but anyway, I
just want to mention Vincent's work. Because I don't, so
last but not least, of course.
Last but not least. Well, it taps into the queer care, right? That's what
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Vincent is, these two are you can see oil on or acrylic on linen. And Vincent is painting their queer and trans Asian Pacific Islander community, but also does performance work that is very much like bringing in, like working with calligraphy and bringing in tradition and heritage. So like in these paintings, I don't know, we were thinking about, again, that idea of queer care and vulnerability and space, and where can we be ourselves? Where can we be at rest? And in a similar way to like Peter's work, like in the image on the left, and then I don't know if we have another one of the third eye, but there's an obvious like sensuality and sexual aspect to the work. And yet the position, right, like we were talking about, is so vulnerable, right? There's like like the neck we talked about with Gabrielle's piece, like this offering of the body in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was overall, like, it was just, for me, even though I'm sitting, I do feel really proud of the show, and that
you should be.
Oh, thanks. To be able to bring together, all these different media also felt like really important to do and tricky to do. But I just feel so like lucky to have worked with you, and like, I mean, I guess it wasn't luck. It was like, it was kind of like, but like that you said, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like very lucky about the whole experience. And I do feel really proud of the show and being able to bring all these conversations into one space and create a queer space here. Like SoMad is a queer and femme run space. And I think that it's like also important for them to also hold, create this space where we can all be as much as possible for the, month and a half that it's.
Yeah, I'm very curious to follow the space from now on.
Yeah, great. Awesome.
Yeah, they've been so incredibly generous and care just as much as we do about the artists, and care about continuing to showcase their work as much as possible, and have as many opportunities for everyone to access this work and have these kind of conversations that we wanted to have. And they put so much faith and believed in us immediately, and it would just made it really easy to work with everybody. And they were so like hands-on to make this come to life. And like, we are so beyond grateful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing team.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that, because so often real projects and experiences are.
Yeah. And every artist is getting a stipend, which should be the norm, but is not always the case. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's important. Like, they're changing, or, the model for group shows, and I think it's important.
And we just had like an artist dinner, and so it's been nice to have multiple opportunities to like support the artist, care for the artist, and
create space,
the stipend, the transparency, create a safe space in the gallery, which there's a lot of the times where galleries don't feel safe at all, and this one does. It literally has like an energy just sitting in it.
Yeah.
Lorenzo and Jay, thank you so much. We're out of time, so we're gonna open it up for questions right now, but I can keep talking to you forever.
I know.
Yes.
And we will.
Yeah.
Have a glitter dinner.
Glitter dinner. Yeah, it's good.
Reese.
Exactly.
Well, that sounds so fun. Thank you all
You're
so
invited.
much. Okay, great. Thank you for an incredible conversation. So I just want to encourage one more push again. If anybody has questions or any of the artists also like want to, feel free to comment, plug whatever you'd like in the chat. But our first question is from our friend GE. So you should be able to unmute.
Thank you so very, very much. What a wonderful congregation of art here, man. This is great. Obviously, we talked about the needed glitter. Could you talk a little bit about the role and use of color and its deployment in the work of gender abolition?
Absolutely. I think okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
My first instinctual reaction is to say like, it points to the playfulness or the fact that it's not, anti-assimilationist spaces, right? So it's sort of like the being among the broken glass. It's not a bad thing. So I think like the show is like there's a lot of pink and yellow. We painted, right, to bring that into there. So to not only make the space not like a white, to get away from the white walls, but in terms of gender abolition and abolitionist politics, I think that the color can disrupt in a way that not only is it not so serious, but it kind of I don't know. I feel like it can create or bring a level of joy or playfulness, or remind us that it's also amazing to be queer and trans and on the outside. It's sometimes really amazing to be on the margins. That offers us a lot of possibilities.
No, thank you so much, and congratulations. What a show.
Thanks.
You.
All right. Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Such a great question. If y'all don't mind, I have a kind of maybe brief question. I'm just thinking about the Saeed, thing that Ksenia mentioned. I think Kari Edwards has like the queer version of it, that identity is limiting, but also and liberating. And I'm just wondering, as artists, really the two of you, how you kind of move through the space of abstraction, and then maybe is it based on also like the time or the political climate when you move towards naming or something maybe more legible or firm. I'm thinking about what Jay had said about illegibility or inability to kind of language, like a lot of queer experience. I wonder if either of you could talk about that, like in your processes as artists.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, a way to abstract and also to communicate when I can't find the words is through materials, and that plays in with color and the glitter and symbology, language. There's a conversation and a communication that's happening with using glitter, even just glitter by itself, but not to mention like beads and fabric. There's a visual language that's happening, and for me, like I use those materials to talk about a feeling that is too complicated to talk about, or maybe isn't. The words don't really do what like visceral textures and materials will do. So that's how I've always thought about abstracting kind of really complicated conversations around identity, besides using my body and performing, is through these materials that I know I'm having a conversation with, and others are seeing that and understanding the language I'm using. Cool.
So I come from like photography and performance background, and so I'm always thinking about the ways in which photographs, by either revealing or refusing, can function. Like how do they speak to whatever topic? So I've actually noticed through time, like, so my early body of work did feature trans people, right? The trans portraits, right? In 2008, it felt like there was like a void of representations. And then another body of work I did is called Policing Gender, and there's no queer bodies in that work at all. And I don't know if it goes towards abstraction, but it's definitely non-representational. And that to me was really about the politics of showing queer bodies, like specifically with the photography and its complicated history. And I didn't want to show queer bodies associated with criminality and deviance. And then thinking about Shimmer Shimmer, it felt like if I was showing my own body, it felt like my body, first of all, needed to be the mechanism or the source material, because I didn't want to only inhabit the space of gender abolition in front of the camera, but also off camera. And so then that's kind of how that became, my body became the source material. But I actually my partner and I actually have an essay that was published in spring this year, 2022, in GLQ, in the special issue that's called Queer Fire, Liberation and Abolition. And we kind of trace the choices to either show or abstract or, it's called representational refusal, is what we're calling it. So yeah, so that's kind of tracks that exact history that you're talking about in terms of the political moments.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for these answers and just for such a great talk. So we don't have any more questions at the moment, and we end our community events here with a special tradition of a poetry reading. And we're really thrilled to have poet Mel Elberg here today with us under the pseudonym as Cole. They had some joining Zoom issues, but we should be able to unmute and everything. Mel Elberg is a genderqueer poet interested in the effect of writing on our experience of time, and their work is featured in, I think it's our summer issue of the Rail. We'll be linking to everything in the chat. So let's see, Mel. Are you here? Oh, there you are. Oh, right. Oh, you've been here. Your video has been on the whole. Okay.
Hey.
All coming together. There you are. Go for it. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry about my connection issues, but that was super lovely. Most of what I could gather when it wasn't glitching to hear you guys talk about your work and the work you curated. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to read a little bit at the end. It's gonna be pretty short, just like 6 pretty new things I haven't read out loud yet, mostly. So they're still kind of finding their footing. No more. More than you think is good enough. Read it again, I say to my demons. Because it was good, we knew it would be strong enough. Read it backwards. A room was meant to hold more than it holds. Left alone, I do believe people are luminous. With only a few seconds left, more than enough. I trust them to change, maybe foolishly. In segments, I swallow the sun, almost filmic. I swallow the sun whole. There was too much lid. It was too heavy, raised by so much more than parents. When it gets to be too much, fall through the floor. At the end of the word celestial, emptiness. Will you become a star or a hole? When I swallow the sun, nothing gets warm or light inside me. Parenting so much more than you raise, I can become consumed with the object of my fire. I think I want to be a hole amongst holes, multiple and simultaneous. She could feel another world pressing against this one like a lover. What does it take to leave, choked out, hot one, that bitch inside, pure, unmitigated peace who scares me? Transformers. Gender, genre, debate team. Sigh of remembrance, sigh of recognition, caulked together, cockeyed, straight into the camera. 2 hands on the glove of my body glow from the costume box. Without language, what percentage does perspective eat out of the heart per shot? 5 stars, high noon. Was hurt a mirror of my own disfigured lenses? Yes, 100 arrows at my eros. A glorious day to be mistaken. This is a little bit of writing I'm doing with a group of feminist artists that I'm collaborating with, I guess, called Brain Trouble. body double. It's like I'm in a gigantic wave and I am the wave, and I surf the wave, then drown or sleep and then startle back into a rhythm. Consciousness pulls away from its protective casing like a cake from the sides of the pan, seaside, encased in the A rhythm. Is their sleep cycle a form of protection? Love gambles on the lengths of the waves and the way we react with them. I love that imprecision. If you wanted to be her and be with her, if you wanted to be him and destroy him, to be both of them wanting each other, having each other, each half of them wanting so badly to be the other, they would destroy themselves. Morning before dreams can escape waking. Remember, 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 remember the song you learned when you were 3. Peas porridge hot. My brain is preparing a blue little room for a memory. My brain, with all its other light up color rooms, falls backward hard into the ocean of Nemesis. My favorite love songs are battered by play, not covered, arranged. You're protected from the words by their tones, their weight from sadness, your voice somehow more purposeful when it follows in the shape of someone else's fantasy. I could drive it with my eyes closed, lose me in a hum. If I were a guitar, I'd be the free one we saw in the street last summer, and everyone would hit me differently. All my love songs would be someone else's. All my songs would cost 1 penny. Very short. Rocks under the water holding up the bridge. Granite and basalt. Beyond the scope of human quantification, granite and basalt. They reflect us in the places where we cut them, without thoughts. They keep our secrets, hold the feelings we think we cannot trust mistakenly. This is the last one. Soul music for Amelia. I lay on a long invisible strip of dream where my friends feed me music. I live for a while as a tiny particle of a great stream of my friends' music. My friends' intensely particular silk and sand way of bringing worlds to light. They talk in a sound like singing. I live for that. Lay in a long and dreamlike river announcing that the song I see part of myself in knows. We get laid to the music and let it grow inside us. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Wow, yeah, that was serious. This is so amazing. Thank you all endlessly. It's just been so incredible. Let's see, yeah, over the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political meditations in our monthly publication and in our public events like the NSE. Please check the chat for a link to donate. Join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation on Robert Heineken and the art of appropriation, featuring Matthew Bureau, Shada Soleimani, Andres Mario Zevigon, hosted by Anne Doran, and we'll conclude with a poetry reading by Joe Elliott. And please turn your mics on. We'll unmute everybody so you can say bye-bye as you go. Really huge thanks to Jay and so.
Thank you so much.
Ksenia, Mel, thank you.
Thank you.
So great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Really, really
Thank
good.
you, guys.
Really
Great
great,
meeting.
everyone. Really
Thank you,
wonderful.
Lorenzo. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.